of the Yoga in Canada Summit. Bienvenue à toutes et à tous. The pool is available only until 5:30 p.m., but make sure you use the complex. So water is available in these buildings. You can refill your water bottles or drink from the fountains. The draw for our door prizes will take place at the end of our event. You will need to be present here, so make sure not to miss those presents. If you feel the need to get up and move around during the presentations, feel free to do so, but please do so behind the chairs, behind others who are seated. Today, on National Indigenous Peoples Day, we acknowledge that we are gathered on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. The peoples of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation have lived on this territory for a millennia. Their culture and their presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We honor the peoples and land of Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. The word Sanskrit, I'm the first time speaking. The Sanskrit word yoga derives from the word yuj, which means to join, to connect. The organization of this event started with such connection between two non-profits of Ottawa, the Great India Festival and the Canterbury Community Association, and has flowered into our gathering here today. What more fitting way to celebrate the International Day of Yoga than to join together to deepen our understanding of this ancient practice. Now, I would like to introduce our guest of honor, Srimati Bharati Sundaresan. Srimati Bharati Sundaresan graduated with a BA Honours in Sanskrit from Delhi University. In Canada, she did a Masters in Comparative Literature involving works in Sanskrit, Russian and German. She has taught Sanskrit from home and at Carleton University. In addition to human languages, of which she speaks 9 fluently, she also studied machine languages and worked in the Government of Canada for 15 years as a computer professional. She continues to be a treasured resource for Sanskrit inquiries in Ottawa. Please welcome Srimati Bharati Sundaresan. Today is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Today, we celebrate the sun's life-giving light, which finds reflection in our hearts. One of the best-known chants in the Sanskrit language, the Gayatri Mantra, also celebrates this light. Sri Satya Sai Baba described this mantra as a sacred chant that demonstrates the unity that underlies manifoldness in creation. And Sri Aurobindo translated the Gayatri as follows: we choose the supreme light of the divine sun. We aspire that it may impel our minds. I now invite our guest of honor, Srimati Bharati Sundaresan, to place her tea light on our stage and then proceed to the mic to chant the Gayatri Mantra as others place their lights to officially open the Yoga in Canada Summit 2023. I request others to follow to place their tea light. Shall we start here?
तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ भूर्भुवस्सुवः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्ति।
A special thank you to our guest of honor, Srimati Bharati Sundaresan Garu, for chanting so beautifully, and to the others for lighting the lamp. I would now let me introduce you to our first keynote speaker, Dr. Ravindra. Ravindra ji has held postdoctoral fellowships in physics at the University of Toronto, in history and philosophy of science at Princeton University, and in religion at Columbia University. He is now Professor Emeritus at Dalhousie University in Halifax, where he taught in the departments of comparative religion, philosophy, and physics. Ravi ji's spiritual search has led him to the teachings of J. Krishnamurti, Gurdjieff, Zen, yoga, and a deep immersion in the mystical teachings of the Indian and Christian classical traditions. He has studied Yogasana with TKV Desi Kachar and received blessings from Sri Krishnamacharya, the acknowledged father of many Yogasana practice styles in the West. Among several books on religion, science, mysticism, and spirituality that he has authored are masterful translations of and commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita and Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It is with great pleasure that we welcome Ravi ji to the stage to help us deepen our understanding of what the ancient texts can teach us about embodying divinity, our theme for the summit of the year. We have asked Ravi ji to first guide us in a seated meditation to help us cultivate a quiet inner focus.
Let me begin with, first of all, an obvious fact that I or you, we did not create ourselves. Personally, for me, to remind myself of this obvious fact, even once a week, actually changes my life. Because then I naturally wonder, what forces have created me and why? Especially in the Indian tradition, Koham, who am I, or I tend to call it actually what am I, is a Bij Prashna, it's a fundamental question. And also to wondering, why have I been created? Then another thing that I would like us to think for a few moments. Every religion insists and says that God is omnipresent. If we don't dismiss this idea, so right here, God is right here, in front of us, behind us, inside us. Everything that we do or say or think or feel is in the gaze of God. With this background now, just take a few moments. What is the call in all spiritual teachings, which are quite different from religions? Religions have almost nothing to do with spiritual search. So what is undertaken in spiritual search is to see how can I, whatever I mean by Ravi in my case, and each one of us, how can I connect with these subtle energies, whether we call it Brahman or God or Allah? Labels don't matter. And the fundamental requirement is more and more freedom from me. Therefore, very important to find a deep relaxation, because all our tensions arise either because of fear or self-assertion. So deeper and deeper relaxation. Take a few moments to now see. We initially think of relaxation only as a physical relaxation, but also an emotional relaxation. More and more freedom from anxiety, worry, whether I am approved or not approved, admired or not admired. Also intellectual relaxation. Even if I had the combined intelligence of Shankara, Nagarjuna, Einstein, I still cannot know all there is to know. Therefore, a little freedom from my knowledge, willing to be surprised. Then pay a little attention to your breathing. We have a tendency to say, I am breathing, which is completely strange, as if I created this breathing apparatus, or the air that I need to breathe to stay alive. I am being breathed. In the Bible it gets said, being breathed by the breath of God. In the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna speaks about that he has taken on my senses. A particle of divinity is actually keeping me alive. And when that breath leaves, this body will die. So pay a little attention to this breathing that is taking place. The English word breath no longer quite carries the richness of the word prana in Sanskrit. Prana also means spirit. In all ancient languages, spirit and breath are very closely related with each other. It is the particle of the spirit that is keeping my body alive. So I pay some attention to this breathing taking place, but without holding my breath, outside or inside. And this sort of relaxation that is invited is not a complete passivity. Even a glass of whiskey would make one relax. That's not the sort of relaxation. A kind of active relaxation. Like a relaxed arrow. Therefore, to find the right posture so that these subtle energies can actually move into my organism, so pay a little attention to my breathing. An absolute necessary requirement in all serious teachings that the spiritual realities we wish to connect with are subtler than the mind. So it is absolutely necessary to quieten the mind. Not so easy. So I connect my mind, which is very mobile, with my body, which is much more stable. But don't fix it at one particular point, because it is not accustomed to total stillness and it will rebel. So allow this mind to move down my spine from the neck to the base of the spine, without forcing anything. And gradually I allow it to coordinate with my breathing in and breathing out. As I breathe out, the mind can move down the back, sensing the back. Krishna actually says he's seated in my body. How do I sense this? And as I breathe in, then the mind can move up the axis. And if the mind moves away from the axis, don't be against it. Bring it back with affection. And prana, even according to the oldest Upanishad, is identically the same as Brahma at its extremely high level. And the suggestion is, if I can breathe with more awareness than I usually do, from the same air that I am breathing, I can take in subtler substances or chemical substances. So now take a moment. I wish to breathe with more awareness. And be impartial, not simply thinking about breathing with more awareness, but actually what is the difference now as I wish to breathe with more awareness. than before. I hope that you will be a searcher, not simply believing something or just imagining something. To assist a little bit staying with the breath, follow the trajectory of your in-breath. Don't depend on any medical book you might have read, but actually experience the movement of the air coming into your nostrils. Where does it go? Remember, mind does not experience. All experience is by sensation or by feeling. Watch the trajectory of the in-breath. Change of temperature along the trajectory, change of humidity. And now add to this watching also the trajectory of the out-breath. Obviously they coincide at the end and at the beginning, but do they have the same trajectory or different? Not knowing, not concluding, just wondering, searching, questioning. Since there is a limitation of time, we cannot really continue with this exercise. So now please take 3 more breaths without holding your breath, without rushing. Then we will stop. Thank you very much.
Wasn't that an amazing experience? Thank you, Dr. Ravindra, for helping us find our ground. I invite you all quietly, take a little break to get water. We will reconvene in about 10 minutes. Before we proceed next, I would like KG to provide a gift of certificate to Bharati ji. And can we have a please applaud for this? Thank you, Kate. Now that we all are rehydrated, let's settle in for Ravi ji's discourse on our theme today, embodying divinity. Please note that you will have a chance to ask Ravi ji questions after his talk, but not during.
Name the world. Everything that exists has a particle of Brahma in it. Actually, the oldest Upanishad, Brahadaranyaka Upanishad, has a specific way of expressing it. Let me give the example from that. Just as the spider web, this I'm quoting from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, just as the spider web oozes out of the substance of the spider, then the spider can move anywhere on the web as well as away from the web. So the whole manifested universe, including you and I, but including this chair, including this floor, everything has emanated from the substance of Brahma. But Brahma is not stuck only with the manifested universe. It can move away from it or be in it. But we don't have, strictly speaking, a creation myth according to which the creator is completely separate from creation. Nobody in the Abrahamic tradition can ever become one with the creator. If anybody ever said that, they were crucified, like Christ is a good example of this, or Al-Halaj in the Islamic tradition, or they were excommunicated, like Master Eckhart. I can give you many examples. But in the Indian tradition, that is the call. It's not something that to be excommunicated for. The very call is to see, not see just ordinarily, but to actually experience and to realize that deep down I am identically the same as Brahma. This is called the supreme identity in the Indian tradition. So, therefore, the call for that is to practice yoga. In a way, one could say, just a quick remark here, as perhaps all of you know that Arjuna has a crisis of dharma in the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna's response really basically is that no action can be right until the actor is right. So how does one become a right actor? And what is a right actor? Strictly speaking, according to the Bhagavad Gita, the right actor is one who is connected with the buddhi rather than wholly taken by manas, that it can be then aware of something coming from above itself. I use the word above, don't get occupied with this geographically, it could be from deep inside. But English language more usually speaks coming something from above. But let us say something coming from a subtler level of reality. Then buddhi can control manas, manas can control the senses. The right actor is one who is able to hear, or not hear in the ordinary sense, but to be aware of what is the call from above myself, more transcendent than myself. And then, so that then my life, my thinking, my action can correspond to that. So, that is really very much the call. And Buddhi Yoga therefore becomes more or less the central feature of that. Here I should take a moment here. As I said, I was surprised that nobody ever seems to mention this. Then I discovered actually in 2001, my paper was published in 1978, a book by a great sage, Sri Anirvan, who had actually written this in Bengali in 1970, I think in 1981 or 82, but it was translated into English in 2001, called, the title of the book is Buddhi Yoga in the Bhagavad Gita. So you're welcome to read that. This is by Sri Anirvan. So it's not that nobody has noticed it, but it surprises me still that people who teach yoga don't seem to know about it. So in any case, the whole purpose of Prakriti, as the Yoga Sutra repeatedly says, is to serve Purusha. But looking at individualized Prakriti, meaning my body, my mind, is to serve this particle of divinity to actually evolve so that it can come back to the very highest source. That's the ultimate aim. But let me assure you Very few people in human history have managed to come to that level. So don't be in a hurry. It might take 100 incarnations. Even the Buddha had to take many incarnations before he could come to real enlightenment. So don't be in a great rush. Take time. But that doesn't mean to give up. That is the call. And then there is a very important feature that one needs to really understand. Every great scientist, poet, artist, certainly any spiritual teacher would tell you that ultimately the insight or the great understanding comes from the other side. As if God is more eager to connect with me than I am to connect with God. But I don't want to be caught. I run away. So the call really is, how do I allow myself to be touched by God, to be transformed by God? This is where there is a constant issue between effort on my side and grace from the other side. Shvetashvatara Upanishad, a great sage after whom the Upanishad is actually named, Shvetashvatara, makes a very important remark. All human realization is a combination of, let me use the Sanskrit words, then I'll translate them, tapas prabhav and deva prasad. Meaning, human effort and benediction of the devas. Very subtle combination of effort and grace. Because it is not a question of my entering into nirvana with my shoes on and conquering God. But how do I become more and more receptive? Einstein, who was hardly a negligible scientist, was periodically asked, is creativity a matter of chance or a matter of hard work? They use the word chance rather than grace. And this might interest you, his remark is very relevant here. He said, ultimately creativity is a matter of chance. It comes from the other side. Every great scientist would agree with this. However, it seems to favor the prepared. So from our side, it's not a question of conquering heaven or going into finding God. How do I become more and more receptive? Traditionally, as everybody knows, activity was associated with males and receptivity with females, which is really the reason why Shiva, who is the Lord of Yoga, is periodically shown as Ardhanarishwar, half male, half female. How to bring the masculine and the feminine tendencies or energies or intentions reconcile, coordinating with each other. Receptivity from my side, willing to receive what is being activated from the other side. So that is really very much the call, which is why I actually suggest to you, any of you who actually practice meditation or yoga in any serious manner, would see there are three very distinct stages. Initially, one is more like a warrior. Have I got the right posture? Have I got the right cushion? Is the light okay? Is too much noise around? Whatever. So, like a warrior, one is trying to find out the right place, right posture, all that is necessary. Soon, one is like a lover. One cannot not be interested. Then sometimes, not so easily, one is the beloved. not even loving something, but being loved by God. We have a very classic example of this in the Gita Govinda with Radha. Much of Indian dancing for a long time is actually based on Gita Govinda in one form or the other. So, therefore, these three different stages, you can watch this in your own action, in your activity. In meditation, it may be easier to watch, but sometimes one can be surprised by something. Warrior, lover, beloved. Let me then also to remind you that there is a bit of a tendency, sometimes I am surprised by all this, as if the body doesn't matter. This is quite silly. Body and the mind are the instruments to assist the evolution of this particular divinity in me. Why be against the instrument? The instrument needs to be sharpened, needs to be taken care of, which is why the whole purpose of asana or pranayama. Patanjali doesn't mention any particular asana by name. In fact, the asana for Patanjali is simply how, in fact, he literally says it's the connection with the infinite and total relaxation. That's his understanding of asana. For him, asana has only relevance to meditation. But that doesn't mean that one needs to be against physical postures. One needs to, I myself undertake every day, at least half an hour or 45 minutes. Appropriate, healthy, good body and mind are required. These are the appropriate instruments. In fact, even so-called ego, people often forget ego is simply the Greek word for self. Let me remind especially those of you who come from the Christian background, all the major statements of Christ, such as I am the way, the truth and the life, they all begin with the word ego in Greek. Ego simply means the self. There is no need to be against the self. Since the beginning of 20th century, largely with Freud and Jung, somehow ego has been condemned to a very lowest level or something. But even at the lowest level, particularly in the Indian tradition, all levels need to be included. Let me remind you again and again, many of my, especially my English friends, for the English, no sex please, we are English. They're upset by sex, but they're surprised to see some of these ancient temples in India, which on the lower story will have all kinds of sexual postures. Why not? Let me remind you, Atriya Upanishad, you can look at it. Because ultimately the call is to relate with Sat Chit Anand, truth, consciousness and delight. Sri Aurobindo, actually very interesting, he makes this remark. Delight created the universe for the sake of delight. But delight can also include sexual pleasure. There is no need to be against that. If you begin in the Atriya Upanishad, I call you to look at it. It begins by saying, a bright young man is in close embrace with his beloved. That is one unit of Ananda. But then continues going. Ultimately, of course, who truly knows himself, millions of times more, that is the real Ananda. So there is no need to be against lower level, even of the ego. Let me remind you, in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, especially in the first chapter, two words are strongly emphasized: Abhyas and Vairagya. Abhyas can be translated as practice, effort, work. No English word quite does the job. But in any case, how can one undertake any abhyas? How can I sit straight or in meditation find time without having a strong ego? But then the call is vairagya, to be more and more free of whatever I am identified with, whatever is me. So both are required. I am inviting you to take this very seriously. Don't be against the ego or lower pleasure lower anything. All this needs to be included. You read Mundaka Upanishad explicitly speaks about that even the lowest self is used as an arrow, that the practice of yoga will then bring one to strike the goal. But the arrow will come there, will connect with it. My own teacher, Jean de Salzman, makes this remark. Maybe I should give you a little background for this. On one occasion, I was specially struck by my own vanity. You have to take my word for it that I used to be even more vain than I am now. Take my word for it. But I was also struck that it is a waste of energy, waste of time, that I gained really nothing from this. So I asked her, how can I be free of this then? And I was completely surprised by her response. She said, if you did not have vanity, what will you do? All your actions begin from your ego. To gain something, to acquire something, even to connect with God, even to acquire Brahma, to go to heaven, to go to Nirvana, all this begins from the ego. But when the real self is there, then the ego finds its proper place. Then a remark which I very often come back to, this is her remark. Ego is a good servant but a bad master. Who wants a servant who wants to just lie around doing nothing? But if the servant begins to make all the decisions in the household, that's where the problem comes. So come back to this. Ego is a good servant but a bad master. This is the ancient Chinese text which actually has a nice way of putting it. When the lion is departed from the forest, from the mountain, the monkey becomes the king. So when the real self is not there or are not connected with it, the ego takes over. But there is no need to be against the monkey, there is no need to be against the lion. Both of them have their place in the woods. So I remind you, first of all, not to be against anything, because even the Rakshasas are required. Daityas and Adityas are both required to search for real consciousness inside. Any of you are familiar with the story of the churning of the Milky Ocean. I don't have enough time to go into the details of this. But all of our so-called negative sides, good sides, bad sides, all of this needs to be considered, brought together to find their proper place. Everything that exists has its place in the universe, even the demons. But Patanjali repeatedly speaks about the importance of connecting with the real seer, with the Purusha, and for which mind needs to be quieted. This is almost the first, it's the second sutra in the first chapter, but the first substantial sutra. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is stopping the movements of the mind. Then the real seer, Tattva Drishtu Swarupe Avasthan. And the real seer can be there in his own true form. But he's not against the mind. This is another thing which one needs to keep in mind again and again. A telescope is not the seer. A scientist can see through the telescope, but then we can have a good telescope or a bad telescope. So the mind is not the seer, but we can have a good mind or a bad mind. Patanjali is very clear about this, that the mind needs to be like a perfectly clear diamond, so that it introduces nothing of its own color. That is almost the definition of samadhi. If you're interested, third chapter, third sutra in the Yoga Sutra. Samadhi is Swarupe Avasthan, freedom from myself, freedom from me. Then whatever is seen objectively, completely objectively. It's a very interesting call in the spiritual search, how to be on the way, but out of the way. This is again and again a call. we have a particularly interesting remark from ancient text saying that when a person dies and goes to the door of the sun, he will be asked, who is it? If the answer is anything other than nobody, he may not enter. So how do I become practicing something, searching for something, and become a nobody? What does that mean? To be free of me. That is the call, very strong call. And action is required from my side, preparation is required. This is why I quoted Einstein for you earlier here. And then another thing that I would like to mention to you, that these kind of spiritual mysteries such as Koham or who am I, even in principle cannot be solved. Because by solve one means as if I can now describe it to somebody else, as if my mind knows it. As I said, even the Buddha could not describe what Nirvana is. None of the great sages can describe it simply because the moment they use the language, that already interferes. And they repeatedly say, it's like describing colors to a blind man. But the mystery, this is quite different, for example, from scientific mysteries, by the way. Let me just take a moment to mention this. I myself, many years ago, when I was actively engaged in physics research, if a PhD student working under my supervision takes on a problem that cannot be solved, he's just wasting his time. Because to get a PhD means you have to find something new. In spiritual search, to come to enlightenment doesn't mean to find something new. If I can even find what the Buddha found, would be great. What Ravi found would be. So one needs to be very clear that scientific mysteries in principle can be solved. Otherwise I will be a wrong supervisor, a bad supervisor, encouraging him to take on a problem that can't be solved. But spiritual mysteries cannot be solved, even in principle, but they are occasionally dissolved. Then everybody does what they are good at. Uday Shankar dances, Kalidas writes poetry, Einstein does physics, Bach writes music, Tagore writes poetry. Here I will actually quote to you something from Tagore. This is a poem he wrote only 13 days before his death. Bengali, which was his mother tongue, but I will read this in English. In the beginning of my life, with the first rays of the rising sun, I asked, who am I? Now, at the end of my life, with the last rays of the setting sun, I ask, who am I? This is his last poem. So I remind you, these mysteries cannot be solved, but they carry enormous energy. At least in physics we say, if something has energy, means it can have an action. Clearly it had an action in Tagore's life, in Kalidas' life, in Uday Shankar's life. I was very fortunate to watch Uday Shankar dance actually in 1968 in New York. This was about his last year of his dance. Extraordinary dance, made the whole earth alive. So maybe I think to allow people to ask any questions if they wish, let me end by just reminding you a very mysterious saying in the oldest Upanishad, Pradaramika Upanishad, quoted later in the Ishavasya. Purnamidam Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate sorry, let me be sure that I don't mix it up. Purnamidam Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Difficult to translate the word Purna. It can be wholeness, fullness, plenitude. No single word does the job. Let's just take the word fullness. Fullness is here, fullness is there, fullness is everywhere, fullness comes from fullness. When you take fullness out of fullness, what remains is fullness. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravindra, for sharing your depth knowledge with us. If anyone would like to ask Raviji a question, we will be setting up this mic just in front of the stage in the center aisle. If you want to ask a question, you can line up there. We ask you to attempt to be concise with your questions. We have allotted 25 minutes for the Q&A session. And I'm going to start things off. Raviji, there are many religions, and some of us have no adherence to any particular religion. In this case, what does it mean to embody divinity? And how can I deepen my yoga practice if this is the case?
That the root of the word religion it comes from Latin, from Greek, religio, to reunite, very much like yoga. In fact, yoga would be the correct translation of the word religion, if one understood the origin of it. But sadly, most religions, in my judgment, are not assisting spiritual search. So to belong to this religion or that religion simply means you believe in this or that. Most people go to religious organizations or the churches either at the time of funerals or at the time of when they want to get married. Otherwise they don't go to churches, right? You can see your own experience. No, religion has been more harmful to spiritual search than anything else. More organized the religion, more it interferes with spiritual search. It just wants you to believe something. So the fact that one actually feels called to search for something, that is the real spiritual search. That is nothing necessarily belonging to this religion or that religion. No religion has a monopoly of truth. There have been great sages everywhere throughout human history, in every culture, but of course, very few come to something. And it is inevitable whenever somebody comes to something so remarkably profound, people around them can hardly believe that this person is an ordinary human being. So they would say, oh, he's half God, half man, or he's son of God, or he's incarnation of God. Various labels like that. You can look at all religions. So all the great teachers get labeled like this. Christ is the Son of God, Krishna is the incarnation of God, etc. So it's inevitable, just because they're rather unusual. So not to imagine that it is easy. Spiritual search is a very long journey. But my impression is no human being actually is completely bereft of that search. But the trouble is that our usual mind and the usual body is so occupied with worldly success. The whole world is being driven by that. So even in our universities, I see even from practically day one, a baby gets encouraged. Oh well, if you smile, then the mother will come and touch you more or hug you more. And then you go to school, you compete with each other so you can go to a better school, get a nice scholarship. So thus it begins. The whole world is driven by competitiveness and therefore correspondingly desire and fears that naturally arise. In fact, it is repeatedly said by people. For example, the Buddha repeatedly says that the whole world is being driven by fear and desire. Or Christ makes this remark that the whole world is under the sway of the prince of darkness. Every great teacher would say that. But actually understanding this and then being a little free of that, not to be against the world, that would be silly. I don't need to be against the body or the mind or the ego, as I keep repeatedly saying, but to find its proper place so that it can actually serve the very reason for my existence, which is to assist this spiritual self.
Thank you so much. That was really enlightening. I just wanted to ask you in the concept or the principle of yoga asana, which many of us are in the beginning stages of this yoga ritual, the asana ritual. Where do we place the concept of ego when we're just beginning yoga as a practice, as an asana?
No, the word ego, as I said, originally simply means the self. Why would one be against the self? Ordinary self, of course, is usually driven by more fear or desire. But then anybody who actually undertakes the practice of yoga already is feeling a certain call, maybe even to assist their body to be more healthy, their mind to be more compassionate, more inclusive. So there is no need to be against any of this. As I said earlier, that is meant to be the instrument to assist the evolution of the spiritual particle in me. Why be against the instrument? But if the instrument just wants to do its own thing and doesn't want to serve anything, then it's not very helpful. Which is one reason I sometimes remind people, in general, most yoga people would agree with me that at the end we do shavasana. It would be helpful to remember, shavasana literally means the corpse pose. The greatest mystery, according to the Mahabharata, you probably all know this background. In the Mahabharata, one yaksha, this is called the yaksha prashna, a question by a yaksha. Yaksha means a celestial being. Don't want to go into all kinds of details, but simply, in any case, he has a question. What is the greatest mystery in the world? And 5 Pandava brothers are somehow engaged with this. All the 4 younger brothers give some answers. He doesn't accept that answer. But the oldest one, Yudhishthira, who is said to be Dharmaputra, he is said to be the son of Dharma, his answer is acceptable. And therefore, according to the Mahabharata, the greatest mystery is everybody sees people around him dying, but nobody believes that he too will die. And I recommend to you that Shavasana is a very good reminder of that great mystery. At the very end of the yoga practice, you are in the corpse pose. One of the difficulties that people don't realize that every asana has a feeling connected with it, has an intellectual meaning connected with it. It is not simply just a physical posture. Shavasana is, of course, can be used simply to now I have worked hard, so I now need to relax. That's what most yoga teachers end up saying. But it is also a good reminder of this great mystery, that whatever I now call Ravi will not be here. In my case, only in a few years, but in general, we would say in a few decades. Therefore, it brings a very different kind of question, different kind of inquiry. So, there is no need to be against any of these asanas, as long as they are actually assisting you not only physically, but also emotionally and intellectually. Anybody else wishes to bring something? Please do. Yeah, use the microphone so others can hear you.
Thank you again for your words. I'm a practicing Buddhist, and during our yoga practice with Kate McDonald, I find the chanting to be both comforting and means of focus during that time. So my question to you is just for you to speak to us about chanting and how you see that, or maybe you don't see it, as contributing to, developing a way of meditation and in seeking spirituality.
Yes. Well, if you just pay attention to your mind, you would see all sorts of sounds or words are constantly going on. So chanting usually means you stay with one particular sacred word or mantra like Om or Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, whatever, especially in Buddhist tradition. Also, Om is used as the very beginning in all traditions arising from India, in Jainism, Sikhism, Buddhism, so-called Hinduism. So chanting can be actually a very great help from the point of view of replacing the usual sounds and noises which are being generated by the world. Right now you can see being replaced by something more sacred. When we use the word sacred, it needs to be clear. Sanctity of that word is not in the word. It is very much to do with my attitude to this. How do I take it? One can, even Hitler could use the word Om, that would not convey the same meaning as somebody else using it. So don't get so attached to particular words. The question is, what is the attitude that I bring to it? That is really the meaning of that something is sacred from my point of view. If Om is sacred from my point of view, then when I chant it loudly or just simply inside, it will replace the ordinary sounds and vibrations. It can be very helpful. Yeah. Yeah, please.
I wanted to ask. So from childhood-
Others can't hear you.
Okay. Is it all right? It's too low. Thank you. Yes, Ravindra, from childhood, my parents have told me, "Kam karo, phal ki mat socho," meaning do your duty and don't think about what is the result. So I believe I've been practicing that for quite some time. So I call myself a karma yogi. Maybe I'm not. But I was fascinated by what you said about buddhi yoga. So when I am a karma yogi, I am doing my day-to-day activities. I am dedicating whatever the result to God. In that state, how do I incorporate buddhi yoga?
Yes. Really, in a way, buddhi yoga, one can get too attached to any of these words, but I'm almost certain in your dancing, with your attitude, you try to be receptive to something that is coming from a level higher than your usual level. That doesn't mean that that level is outside, that can be deep inside us. But it is subtler than our usual level to which we are connected. That is really, in a way, strictly the call of the Buddhist yoga. But therefore, what I'm saying that we may not use that word, but if one brings that attitude, one is already slightly connected with that. But to actually use that expression can assist you to see more and more clearly. To then even to call yourself, take a few moments even before dancing. In fact, I'm sure you probably do that. Every dancer in India that I have ever seen does it. They sit, they stop, they bow down, You see, that is in a way already an indication of recognizing something subtler or higher than myself. Deep within, see, but we use the word higher. This is just a language problem. So, in a way, to be a little bit more connected with Buddha Yoga is intentionally a call. Can I take a few moments of quietness, not be struck, driven by my ordinary mind, which is just associating one thing with the other, one idea with the other. Quieting of the mind slightly more allows me to connect with the subtler mind, higher mind. When Patanjali speaks about that your mind can become like a clear diamond, that is really just connecting with Buddhi rather than with us. Yes, please.
Okay, it's said that we are made of three parts, body, mind and soul. And soul is going to get peace, real peace when it goes to its merges with God. And mind when it goes into Trikuti, and that's where it belongs to. And we are made, the body is made of 5 elements, water, earth, fire, air, and sky. So, and the body is going to get peace when those 5 elements merge into those elements merge into their things. So while living, is it when we do the meditation that we withdraw our consciousness and when we can empty the mind, or when we are not, then how do our body part gets peace? Like, because those 5 elements we cannot merge, we are after death only, we can do that.
See, the difficulty is even the way you have just expressed it, the word mind. The trouble is with the word mind, because
my question is about the 5 elements of the body that we are made of, that while living, because sometimes there is pain, sometimes this, so how to go above that?
Yes. First of all, to recognize that this body will die is a very helpful reminder. The reason I wanted to say that the word mind includes both the monkey mind as well as the Buddha mind. And the call is not to be against the mind, but to cultivate its refinement so it can move from the monkey mind to the Buddha mind. And of course, the body is the container of the spiritual element. It's a little bit like, one might say, a good temple. Spirit sometimes can descend into that temple, but if I get so occupied with fixing the walls of the temple and I don't really care whether the spirit comes or doesn't come, then I'm just cleaning the temple all the time. So the body, in fact, this is actually explicitly a remark of St. Paul in the New Testament. Body is the temple of the spirit. So this body is there so that the spirit can act. You call it the soul. Now this again is a bit of a tricky thing. In English expression, spirit and soul have been identified, especially since the 16th century, by a book by Descartes. These are 2 different words. Soul is personal. Your soul is different from my soul. But spirit is transpersonal. And the call really is for my soul to evolve, that it can come to the level of the spirit. And therefore, the instrument is required for that, which is the deha, or the body. So, but it is true that it is here only temporarily. Transience of the body is a reminder not to delay this search. On the other hand, especially in the Indian tradition, very strong suggestion throughout the tradition that until we actually come to the level of the spirit, you will end up taking more and more bodies. That's the whole idea of reincarnation. That until you actually assist the development of the soul to the level of the spirit, you will keep taking on a body. Sooner or later it will die, then you will take another body. But there also the call is to go beyond incarnation or reincarnation. That doesn't mean to be against incarnation. I keep saying this, not to be against the body or against the incarnation. After all, why does Krishna take incarnation? He is not required to take incarnation. But in order to assist those, or all the in Buddhist tradition particularly, all the Bodhisattva people, they take on a vow that they will not go into nirvana until, actually, it's an amazing vow, until every blade of grass is enlightened. This will never happen. This is their vow, until every blade of grass is enlightened. So, our body is required, but to get wholly occupied with the body is not the call.